From 1914 to 1918, the whole world, or at least the most advanced nations, were fighting each other. That period or that war is called the First World War. So during the First World War and before the Second World War, there were many changes. So in this module, we will look at the changes from 1914 to 1939, when the Second World War started. So the impact of this World War was experienced in all areas. So no section of the society was really exempted. The very rich or the very poor, everyone was affected. Out of a population of 43 million, if we exclude the women, the children and the old, the young men will be around 10 to 15 million. And of these 10 to 15 million, almost 6 million volunteered to fight. So 6 million soldiers, almost 1 in 3 young men or middle-aged men of Britain fought in this war. Of these 6 million, 2.5 million were killed or injured. So huge losses that affected all sections of society. So it was a total war, and the Prime Minister and the Chancellor of Exchequer, which is the Finance Minister in Great Britain, they said, our lads are fighting overseas, but when they come back, we will give them a land fit for the living of heroes. So we will improve conditions so that when they come back after fighting, after giving their lives or injuring themselves, they will find a country much better than it was before. So what were the changes during the war? So there was, of course, heavy taxation to finance the war. The heavy taxation became more acceptable. More women started to work in factories because men were fighting overseas. There were less class distinctions as everyone fought, died, and endured together. After the war, the economy grew, but slowed as more competition came from the US and other nations. Mortality rate fell as life expectancy increased by an average of 15 years. So the average life expectancy for men was 66 years, and for women it was 71 years. The public spending had to rise. So immediately after the war, there was a depression, and the public spending had to rise from 12% of GDP to 25% of GDP. Public sector employment also rose to cover for the unemployment by the business and after the war. So it increased the cost of social welfare. As more and more people were unemployed, government had to pay them, and that money had to come from areas which was not present. So government was forced to reduce by 10% the spending on unemployment in the 1930s. The major changes in this era were related to housing. So in the previous eras, we have seen that there was not much change in housing. There was no public housing. There was no idea that there should be public housing in Britain. So during this era, local governments were given powers to construct housing of good quality for the working people. Subsidies were also given to the industry, like today in Pakistan, government has said that they are going to subsidize the construction of housing for the poor and middle classes. So 1 million homes were built from 1919 to 1930, of which 200,000 were subsidized by the state. So in Housing Act of 1930, local authorities were given power to designate areas for slum clearance and rehousing. The Housing Act of 1935 addressed the overcrowding by the local authorities. This period was dominated by foreign affairs. There was war, and then there was again, lots of activity in the foreign affairs as Germany and Hitler flexed their muscles, and Japan and Italy also. But in Britain, there was again a shift from welfare skepticism meaning there were doubt about the social policy, to welfare collectivism, meaning there more and more action in the social policy sphere.